Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Going great. I think right before we started recording this, was talking about doing the no caffeine weeks or month. And man, I tell you, I don't know how some people out there do it without any caffeine. So it's really catching up. But other than that, work's going great. I'm enjoying the podcast, and I can't wait for all the listeners. I just want to say I appreciate all of you guys out there for like and subscribing to ours and giving us reviews, 5-star reviews. We really, really appreciate that. I know I do. It's been able to connect us to a lot more people and get it out there so we can help more and more people and just give them the knowledge for commercial real estate. So what about you, Raphael? How are you?
Yeah, no, same. I mean, like similar to you, I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, so it's not a problem over here, but it's been super busy as of late, especially as the weather's been starting to pick back up. I think there's just people, are eager to get things done. And so it's been an active last few weeks, and it's been exciting. And similar to you, as you mentioned, I mean, it's been awesome to see the 5-star reviews we've gotten and the support we've gotten over the last, year, almost a year now, which is crazy to think. We started back in May of last year. So it's amazing that you guys have been so supportive over the course of this last year, and continue to do that, continue to, engage with the podcast. And, if you haven't already, leave us a review because it really does help. And speaking of like just a phenomenal conversation and really just an interesting person is we actually had the honor and privilege of interviewing Dan Palmeri. He's a senior director at Cushman Wakefield in Las Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as they say. But in this case, Dan was actually an open book and shared a lot of unique insights pertaining to the office market within Las Vegas. And so we talked a little bit about his background and got an understanding of where he comes from. He's originally from Southern California. His dad was in the restaurant business, and he worked in the restaurant business in a variety of different capacities from when he was 13 all the way up to his late 20s. So, I mean, just an impressive individual. And it goes to show the value that the service industry provides. I mean, I, had experience as a busser, server, managed a restaurant for a little while. And again, the skills that I gained throughout those experiences are so valuable. And it kind of comes off when you're interacting with Dan, that you could tell that he's, refined those social skills in order to become, a top broker within his market. Then we talked a little bit about, the tenant rep process. He's actually a tenant rep for office properties within the Las Vegas market. They actually have 30% market share, which is absolutely amazing. They're the top team in the entire state. And he kind of shared his process for working with, both small and large clients to be able to find them office space. And then we touched on, the social media side of things. He was an early adopter of social media. He actually got started with Twitter, I believe in 2010. And, from there, he's gotten on LinkedIn and Instagram and all these other social platforms, and really has built a significant amount of reach and generated business through these experiences. So, he's shared some insights pertaining to how you too can do it if you're willing to commit yourself to posting on a regular basis. And then finally, we touched on a little bit pertaining to what he thinks the future of office is going to look like in a post-COVID environment. It was kind of cool. We got to talk a little bit about, what he sees in Las Vegas. We talked a little bit about what's happening in Louisville. And since he's at Cushman Wakefield, which is a very large corporate organization, he talks to brokers across the country. And so we got some insights to, touch on pertaining to some of those other sites as well. So I found it an extremely helpful conversation. Jeff, what do you think?
Dan being a tenant rep, that's what really stood out to me, and the reasons why he wanted to be a tenant rep. So I can't wait for all of you guys to listen for his main reasons of why he wants to be a tenant rep agent. So I can't wait. But other than that, Dan's a great guy. So
Oh, absolutely. And if you guys are interested in tenant representation in the office space in particular, I mean, this is going to be a must listen to episode. And even if you're not, I think you're going to gain a lot of perspective. And for those who are looking to invest in office buildings, taking some of these, insights that he's going to share is going to be invaluable to you, because you understand what people think as they're looking at these office spaces, so that you can attract the right tenants to your building. So again, we found a lot of value from this podcast. Hopefully you will as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the podcast. So, hey, Dan, how's it going?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Cannot complain. The weather's been picking up in our neck of the woods, and we're located in Louisville, Kentucky. And as we were talking about just off the recording, but the weather's been picking up. We've got Thunder of Louisville, which is a big event coming up. And then obviously the Derby is right around the corner. Yeah. So that's going to be as always, it's a big event for the city. So
fun. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So first off, thank you for coming on the podcast. I know, you're very active on social media, and that's kind of how we connected. I saw a lot of your content. It's super valuable. So I thought you'd be a great person to have on the show to kind of talk a little bit about your background and your story. So what we typically do when we first interview the person, we kind of like to learn a little bit more about them and their background. So if you don't mind kind of sharing your story, I think that'd be super helpful.
Sure. Absolutely. Born and raised in Southern California, and in the restaurant business. So, son of an Italian immigrant and a American mother, and they opened up an Italian restaurant in Calabasas 4 months before I was born. And so, born and raised in the restaurant business. My dad put me to work at 13. Had no choice. Thought I was just helping out. Little bit I know that was a 18-year commitment to the family business. So come senior year of high school, my family decided to sell the restaurant, moved to Vegas to retire, and a year later opened a restaurant in Vegas. So spent the majority of my adult life working in the restaurant business, serving tables, managing, you name it, and had no life, right? So no weekends, no holidays, none of that. And was serving tables. It was a high-end restaurant, right? So more gourmet style. And these guys kept coming in, drinking good bottles of wine, Opus and Camus, and talking about going to Newport every weekend. So I asked them what they did, and they said they were in real estate. And I was a little confused. I said, well, don't you guys have open houses on the weekend? I mean, how do you just leave? And they said, oh, no, we're in commercial real estate, and you don't really work on the weekends. It's a Monday to Friday thing. And I was like, I need to get into that. So that piqued my interest. Obviously didn't know anything about it. And found my way in. So I got licensed, started working for a customer who sold apartments, and worked with him for about a year. He sold apartments before I got there, but never sold any once I was there. So didn't learn a whole lot, and then moved over to Colliers International, and was their apartment guy, and had my first deal 10 days from closing when the banks crashed. And so didn't know what that meant. Asked the guy in the office there, and he said, you should probably try to get into office or industrial, because nobody's going to buy apartments for probably a few years. And so I was still working at the restaurant the whole time, paying the bills, and found a guy to take me under his wing on the office tenant rep side. Loved it, and been doing it ever since. So worked with him for about 3 years, and then moved over to Cushman Wakefield 10 years ago now. So I've been at Cushman just over 10 years. I lead a 4-person exclusive tenant rep team. We're the top tenant rep team in the market. So really in the state of Nevada, which still, kind of blows my mind. I still think of myself as that kid just came from the restaurant business. So it's been a fun run, right? So growing. We're as busy as can be. We have a lot of fun doing what we do. And so, that's kind of the background.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm just to give you background on myself. I'm actually half Italian myself as well. I was actually born in Northeast Italy. My mom's Italian. Oh, wow. So fellow Italian brother, that's good to hear. And also the restaurant business too. I mean, it's such an invaluable, being in the service business, I think in particular, what we do is, teaches you so many skills. That's the only other job I had outside of, I was in engineering college and then got into the engineering field for a little while. But before that, all my experience was in the service business. I was a busser. I was a server. Yeah. I managed a restaurant for a bit. And the lessons that I learned during that experience were just so invaluable. So, it's kind of.
Well, and for me too, because being on the ownership side, right, you're one of the first in and definitely the last out, and you're working every weekend and every holiday. So, what my dad instilled in my brothers and I is work ethic. And so I'm typically still first in, sometimes last out, and I feel like I'm barely working, right? Because I'm home for dinner and I have weekends off. So it's while I'm putting it more hours in than most, I feel like I'm barely working with. So it's a good training for having them put in that work. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Speaking of just putting in work, I know like early on when you first started and stuff, what were some of the struggles that you faced, like actually growing your business? Can you
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, first and foremost, I didn't have the gray hair, right? I wasn't seasoned, and so I think I tell anybody getting into not only this business, but any business is, find who's doing it at the top level, right? And well, that's my mindset. I mean, I know plenty of brokers that are happy making 150 grand a year and they're out at the lake every Friday or golfing, and God bless them. That's not how I'm wired, but if that's the life you want, it's still a great career. It'll take you time to get there. But, for me, I always want to be first. Right. And so I think that's the majority of type A broker personalities. And so my recommendation is make a list of the top 3 or 4 brokers in your market doing it at the level you want to do it, and reach out and see if there's an opportunity just to mentor, to shadow them, to do it for free. Right. My dad told me 2 things. He said, A, work your ass off, and B, nobody's going to give you anything for free. Right. Like, you have to put in the work. You have to provide value. And so, when I teamed up with my mentor that taught me the tenant rep side, I said, hey man, I'll be here every day at 5, but I got to leave at 4,
Yeah.
And so, and really the precipice behind that was I told myself in my mid 20s when I got going, like, hey, realize that I'm going to have to punt and sacrifice fun and going out to get the life and career I want. Right. And so I punted my late 20s in Las Vegas, right, which is the best time to be in Vegas, right? And I just foregone it and, kept my head down. I had 1 day off a week for 6 years, and it was a recession, right? So it was a little different timing, but that's really the big thing is finding somebody that's doing it at the top level, because you're getting to learn from the best, right? Like, it's, if you're going into the NFL, you want to be on the Patriots, you don't want to be on the Browns, and so, it's just one of those things. By learning from the best and seeing people do it at the highest level, you're going to learn how to do it at the highest level. And then whether you stay with them forever or decide to go on your own at some point, you've accumulated the top skill set you can get for what it is you're looking to achieve.
That's amazing. And the fact you also cut your teeth in probably one of the worst economic environments for, commercial real estate that we've seen in our lifetime is obviously something that should be said as well. And I mean, because if you can operate in that environment, I mean, you could also operate in a bear market or a bull market, in an environment where things are going well. So that's
I was at a NAIOP breakfast this morning, and I was actually chatting with a gentleman much more senior than me at another firm. He's been a broker for almost 30 years in the market. And we were talking to 2 new guys that are, maybe 3 years in, and, I go, how is it going, guys? They go, we're slammed. And I go, enjoy it, because you haven't experienced not slammed yet, and so, and Brad and myself started chuckling, and absolutely. And even the guy that's been working with me for almost 2 years now, right, he doesn't understand that the 20,000 and 30,000 and 40,000 foot deals that are just churning in, that's not normal, right? And so, at least from my perspective, and when I got into the business, we were working on the biggest deal in the market for 2 years. We had the biggest deal in the market, and it was 40,000 feet, and so, different times for sure.
Definitely great insight. So, for those of you guys who are listening, so Dan represents office tenants. And so I kind of wanted you to kind of walk through, the site selection process and give us an understanding of, when you start working with some of these business owners and given the fact you're operating at a relatively high scale, what are some of the things that you do from start to finish to get someone from, the idea of wanting to move or operate within a space to actually ultimately getting into a space?
Yeah, 100%. Right. So I think here's my thing, right? I only do tenant rep, and my goal is A, to look out for the little guy, right? And B, not try to put them into a listing that benefits me, right? I want to find them the best space, period, that works for their business, for their growth needs, for their, for everything. And so it's not only understanding what their layout needs are, but what your long-term budget needs, what's your growth plans, if any, right? What are your hours of operation? What geographies are important to you? Is being close to your employees important or close to your clients? I mean, there's so many questions to ask above and beyond the layout of the space, right? But so we always start with, are they in existing space? When does their lease expire? Are they happy where they are? Yes or no. And if they're moving, why are they moving? Where do they want to move to, et cetera? So doing a bunch of qualifying questions and then running a survey of the market. So not only, I think at this point in my career, it's a little different where I'm in constant communication with the brokers, the listing brokers in our market. And we benefit from being in a smaller market, right? So our office market's about 40 million feet, but in reality, we have like 30 brokers in the whole valley that are actively transacting. And so we keep our tabs on all those buildings. So not only for obviously actively listed spaces, but knowing what's coming available down the road, right? And so finding those off-market opportunities, which for me over the years has proved invaluable, when you're in a sub-market that's as hot as can be and there's no space available, but you're able to find your client a full floor in the most desirable building, people go, how'd you do that, right? Well, I asked the right questions, and so it's understanding the market and then, just putting together, obviously, the survey. And then the biggest thing for me, what I like about being on the tenant rep side is I'm trading paper with all the landlords versus focusing on my 5, 7, 10 specific listings. So I'm learning the intricacies of each landlord. What are their hot buttons? What aren't their hot buttons? Do they want to perform TIs or would they rather trade for abatement? Everybody has a different approach to their investment. And so when we're going over those, just the initial survey with our clients, trying to determine which buildings to shortlist, having that knowledge proves invaluable because, hey guys, this building's perfect for you. The caveat is this landlord will give you $0 in tenant improvement allowance. So long as the layout is perfect, it's great. If you need to add 8 offices, you're paying for it. And they'll go, yeah, let's take that one off the list. Or they're totally fine with it, right? So having the knowledge to walk them through it. And then obviously you go and tour. And my job is to create leverage. Even if I know they're going to stay, I want to create that leverage or the, at least, impression that we are not captive. Because 70% of office tenants renew, right? And so landlords know that it's a pain to move. It's expensive. It's an interruption to business. And most people don't want to do it. Well, my job is to get not only the existing landlord to a point where you're going to give them a more favorable deal to stay than if they were to vacate, right? Because now you got to list the space, you got downtime, you're going to have to pay for TIs and commissions anyways. Might as well keep the tenant you've had in the space for 5 years. So we create the leverage, we negotiate, and we're there, by the tenant side the whole way, explaining everything to them and ultimately just trying to give them the absolute best deal possible, right? I tell people I'm the only guy in the market that goes out of his way to make less money, right? My job is to get you the best deal possible. I'm paid on deal value, and so, but I find joy in it, right? Like no deal's going to make or break my career, my life. So yeah, my job is to just look out for the client's best interest.
That's that's awesome. And that is that one of the reasons why you decided to specialize on the tenant rep side, or is it just because that was kind of a function of, you getting into the industry and that's the person that, you identified as one of the top performers in your industry? If you could elaborate, that'd be kind of helpful.
Yeah, there's a few reasons why. I mean, yes, right. I like looking out for the little guy. B, it's hard to get fired. I've seen landlord brokers that do a great job and they have a listing for 2 years and they've had to tour the project 89 times and respond to 50 proposals and not get a deal done, not to any fault of their own, right? The landlord ultimately is the one that makes or breaks the deal. And then they go, hey, it isn't working. Thanks so much. I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. He's got a listing with a very difficult landlord. And he goes, I've done 114 tours and we've leased 1,800 square foot space. And that blows I have no interest in that, right? So I'd rather take the time to go tour for 3 or 4 hours and show the multiple properties. And so what I don't get sign calls, right? I typically don't get to sell the building after I lease it up, which is fine. Like I've chosen that, But my sales pitch is real easy as well. Hey, my job is to find you the best space possible to beat up your landlord, and then your landlord is going to pay me. Right? I mean, it's a pretty easy sales pitch. And so, yeah. And on top of that, I don't like doing monthly reporting. That's just, we have a big landlord guy in our office, and man, does he love his spreadsheets, and he's always sending them to me. Who's the tenants in the market? And I'm like, I just want to go look at space, negotiate on space, and have fun doing it,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I can relate to the reporting side. And again, I'm at a boutique brokerage here locally, but some landlord, depending on what their desire is, I mean, they're going to want, updated reports all the time and all this other stuff. So yeah, I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
And when I started going, every broker in the market said, you're going to have to take listings. It's not a big enough market to just do tenant rep. And I said, okay, but I stuck to it. And now it's at a point where, we're doing 30% of market share on the tenant side. I mean, that's pretty good for a waiter,
Oh my God, well, waiter, man, you're performing at such a high level. That's awesome, man. And like you were talking offline, I mean, the Vegas market is expanding rapidly, and so I know we'll touch on that a little bit later, but you're poised to continue your growth over a long period of time. So that's awesome.
So you done I kind of want to go back to like on the business owner side. How do you typically like coach them when they're trying to analyze their opportunities? Say they're looking at their surveys and they're saying, okay, I got 2 different spaces here. Can you like kind of walk us through just an example of what you've done recently
Sure.
to help a owner out?
Well, I mean, obviously we're putting together a financial analysis, and I mean, it's really what's the end game for the client? What is most important to them? Is the space there for recruiting and retention of employees? So does it need to be a cooler space, or is it more important to be close to where everybody lives and it doesn't have to be as nice? Especially coming out of COVID, a lot of our clients, their biggest concern and biggest issue is trying to get people to come back to the office. So we've absolutely seen a flight to quality over the last year and a half. Tenants signing leases in the brand new under construction Class A stuff, setting record rental rates, right? But they know they're going to beat their competition when it comes to recruiting that new employee out of college, right? So there's a big flight to quality. Prices are going up, so it's a realistic thing, but ultimately it comes down to really listening to the client, right? So a few years ago we did a law firm deal where they were in the penthouse of the nicest building downtown, and we were negotiating for the penthouse of the nicest building out in the suburban master class of Summerlin, right? And it's kind of where everybody wants to be. And so I said, guys, listen, the buildings are exactly the same, right? You're on the penthouse. Either way, you're going to have nice space. What you told me when we first started working together was your main focus is your ability to recruit employees, right? And so while downtown is closer to the courthouse, you're surrounded by vacant lots, vagrants, and no retail amenities. In Summerlin, you go downstairs and there's the Apple store, right? Literally across the street from the breezeway. And then you got all these new restaurants and the baseball park and the hockey arena. And so it's like, the deals are the same. It's a geography question for that particular client, right? And so same thing with the new client we had. We were in renewals in their existing location, and they did a survey feedback of employees wanting to come back. And they just said, it's not fun in the office. So we are now finalizing a lease right down the street in a mixed use project that's office over retail, full of amenities. There's a Whole Foods, there's a movie theater, right? Is the rent more? Yep. But their employees are going to come back to work, So every company is different, but it's really just listening to what their end game is and what their needs are to try to find them the best space for that,
Absolutely. Yeah. We actually interviewed a gentleman in New Jersey, Jeremy Neuer, who's a big time office. He sells office buildings there in New Jersey. And he was mentioning how, there is that flight to quality. You're starting to see it post COVID where in order to retain and attract people back to the office, a lot of these business owners are reconsidering their current office space. And, that's ultimately leading to people willing to pay more for space in a nicer and more amenitized building. And so, I kind of agree with you on that front. Here in Louisville, we have some issues as far as downtown's concerned. obviously what happened the last 2 years has kind of affected, office vacancy downtown. And so we're starting to see flight to the suburbs here, where you're getting like newer developments happening, in the suburb areas. And, obviously retail's growing around those different areas. And that's kind of where people are starting to flock to. And, it's just, I guess it's so market specific. So.
And we're seeing the same thing here, right? And we've never had a traditional downtown like most cities. Our downtown's really government uses and law firms, right? And not a lot of people live downtown. So the offices are popping up where the employees live, what's easier access, and Vegas is a town that's not that big geographically. So they made sure everything you need is within 10 minutes of your house, right? So when people have to drive 20 minutes, they start to complain. And so when you have to drive 20 or 30 minutes to work, now you've got employees that may just look elsewhere so they don't have to drive as far.
Yeah. And then we're similar in that front here in Louisville, the exact same way. We don't have a very strong residential presence in our downtown. And, 20 minutes driving is a ways, like in our city, compared to Phoenix, where, when I lived there, I mean, you could drive from one end to the other. It takes you like an hour and change to get where you need to go. So definitely that's some good insight. So one of the things I wanted to touch on, especially with our conversation, is obviously, you've been an early adopter within social media. We talked a little bit about Twitter offline, and then obviously LinkedIn. So could you kind of tell us a little bit about how social media has impacted the way you do business? And that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So for me, I mean, again, going back to when I was getting into the business and trying to get my name out there, and I didn't have any money, again, I was working 2 jobs. One was paying for the other one. And so I always thought of myself as like, think of it like a residential agent, no matter where you live in the country, every neighborhood has 4 or 5 residential agents that send stuff to that neighborhood month after month in the hopes that if you don't know a realtor and you need to sell your house, let me grab that postcard from Sally, who's been sending it to me. She knows the area, and Sally gets the business, right? I was like, well, that's great, but that's a little different in commercial. So how do I get my name out there as broad as possible and for as cheap as possible, right? And so obviously I knew social media had reach, and that's what I focused on, and started with Twitter, before LinkedIn, and I never used Facebook for business really, and don't use Instagram much for business. But started with Twitter just to build a brand online, and started, connecting with folks from around the country. I also made sure that when I go to conferences, people knew me as the guy from Vegas. So when I first got started and I would go to Cushman Wakefield conferences, I had custom flash drives made that looked like the Vegas sign. So when everybody was giving me their Cushman and Wakefield business card, I was giving them a Vegas flash drive. And by day 2 of walking around the conference, they're going, "What's up, Vegas? What's up, Vegas?" And that's all you want, right? You want to be the person to get the phone call. And so now for me, LinkedIn has been a huge success. I've been using it for years, and I don't have a set post a week thing. I just do it when I want to. And so it's funny, I haven't been posting much over the last couple of months, and I got called out the other day by somebody. He's like, "Hey man, I haven't seen your stuff lately." You're like, okay, so I posted a photo 2 days ago, and it took off, right? So it's just a matter of being consistent with it. But ultimately, yeah, it's grown my brand tremendously to where the amount of views, engagement I get, deals, right? Like I literally got a message yesterday. I owed this lady a call this afternoon saying, "Can you please call me regarding office space?" Absolutely, right? So, and then again, with that growing a brand, that turns into being on more panels, right? So I want to be the guy that's speaking in a room of 300. I don't want to be the one listening in a room of 300, right? All eyes on me, Dan from Vegas, Dan from Vegas. It builds brand, it builds recognition, which turns into business coming out of nowhere.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And this is something we've been, focused on, over the last about 2 years now, a year and a half. And obviously with the podcast, we've had over 60 episodes now, and, just consistently getting out there and sharing it on different social platforms. And you kind of mentioned it, which is, it is a free platform. And so people who are just getting started, it's one of the most cost-effective ways you can start to build your brand. And it doesn't really take, it can take some time, but you shouldn't let it take the time where you just are always just scrolling through your feed or whatever else. But if you come up with something pithy and helpful that you can share on social media over time, it adds up to huge results. And when did you start your journey? I guess, was it right in the 2012 range, or?
I mean, yeah, I think I joined Twitter in 2010, right? Maybe even earlier. I'd have to look back. But, and again, so, I mean, I've taught a few classes on LinkedIn and how to use it. And people are like, well, how much time do you spend on it? Very little for me, right? I'm not, so many people are voyeurs when it comes to LinkedIn or Instagram or everything else. 10% are creating content, 90% are consuming it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a content creator. I consume very little. I'm not the guy you're going to see at his desk scrolling through LinkedIn, liking and commenting stuff. And while that may be wrong, I'm too busy, but I want people to hear what I have to say or put out some valuable information or whatever it may be. So I'm on there, and then I am responding to the people that comment on my stuff, right? So I am communicating with them, which is huge because it's networking. I connect with absolutely everybody that requests because I'm looking for eyeballs, right? It's my marketing machine. And so I connect with everybody knowing I'm creating content. So they're going to see it and their connections are going to see it, right? I'm not the one scrolling for 30 minutes, liking and commenting on people's stuff. And if you are, that's great. That is definitely a way to start creating relationships with individual folks. My approach has been different, and so I post. I don't think about it. I don't overthink it. I don't create pre-production stuff. I literally walk outside. I hold my camera up. I do a video. I try to keep it down to one take. If I really mess up my words, I'll do another take. But I just did a video. I'm waiting on our quarterly report to come out. The video's done because I was driving by one of the new buildings that just got delivered. I was like, oh, let me do a video in front of the building. I kind of fumbled one sentence. I'm keeping it. I don't care, right? Like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to get done. And so I'll do it right there. If I'm waiting for a client to show up and they're 10 minutes late and I have something pops into mind, I'll throw out a video. It'll be posted before the client shows up. I don't think about it again. It's not on my mind. I'm not worrying about what I'm writing. Like, we're all pretty smart people. What comes to mind, post it. People always ask, what should I post? Well, what was the last question the client asked you? Now just respond into the camera. Very simple to do, right? Nobody's reading my quarterly reports and nobody's reading my brochures. Like, nobody cares about that stuff,
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I kind of agree with what you're saying. I do like a little video every Monday where I ask a frequently asked question, and it's literally the same thing that what you do. I just have a little stand, put my phone there, answer a question, one take. If I fumble through it, it doesn't matter. And I just throw it out there. And, obviously at first it's kind of awkward to do. Anytime you record yourself in whatever settings, the first time you do it or the few times you do it, it's really awkward and kind of, clunky, but over time you get better at it. It's like any skill.
Yeah. So I tell people it's like the first time you were ever on a panel, you were sweating bullets. The second time you were barely sweating bullets. And the third time you're like, okay, let's go. Right. So it's the same with this stuff. I have fun with it. Right. I don't take it serious at all. And I think that's the biggest thing. People really try to overthink it. They're so worried what people are going to think about them that they don't do it. I don't care what people think about me. Like, I am who I am, whatever.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
So I know earlier we were kind of discussing like COVID and office and people are coming back. And I kind of wanted to get like your take on the evolving office space sector and see like where you see it's going. Cause I know people this year are thinking, well, we got another good year. Maybe next year might be good, but 2014, it's going to be shambles. So I didn't know what you thought on the office space sector, what you're thinking.
Yeah. So, I mean, the breakfast event we were at this morning was actually talking about the return to office. So pretty fresh. There was probably 300 people in the room. They asked how many people are back in the office. I'd say 90% raised their hand. They asked how many people can work remotely and choose to. Nobody raised their hand, right? It was very interesting. Yeah. Every company is still trying to figure it out. There's no right answer, right? So I've got clients that are back office users and they can't pack them in tight enough. I've got people that are much more sensitive to it. I find that the bigger Fortune 500s are, more corporate governance are much more sensitive to it, where the mom and pops or, single location tenants, or, just come back to work. Right. But all the deals we're working on where there's space planning, it still looks like traditional office space, right? There's not a whole lot of difference in regards to what they're laying out. Maybe a little bit more collaborative, space for folks, or let's throw the game room in there where we previously wouldn't have done that type of stuff. But I'm not seeing a drastic shift to how layout design is happening, right? Again, I think it's more discussing the building and the amenities as much as the specific layout. And then, it's everyone's different in their return to work, right? And I've had some clients that said, hey, we've realized that we are way better 100% remote, and they've closed shop, right? But those are far and few between, for sure. In our office, I think we were probably a little bit more progressive in return to office, but man, I'd say we have 90% people here every day, right? And we're seeing that across the valley. The real barometer for folks, if you're wondering what's going on in your valley or your city, is just look at the cars in the parking lot, right? When you drive by an office building, that'll tell you exactly what's going on.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And you're starting to see it here in Louisville too. And obviously we're more of a secondary market. But again, people are starting to go back to the office in droves. And I know in larger markets across the country, New York City and, Austin, San Francisco, all these other markets, I mean, similar type of trends. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But, again, I think it's a lot easier to manage people when you're in an office setting versus digitally. I have a, virtual assistant I work with, and sometimes it's kind of hard to, communicate via Zoom all the time, via text or whatever. And so having someone that you can literally go across the office to and just kind of communicate your intentions or whatever you need, ultimately that's the better way to do it.
Well, especially when we talk about the businesses where mentoring is required, right? So commercial real estate, law, financial services, et cetera, where I need my guy to be sitting there. I need him to be listening to the phone calls I'm having. I need him to understand the process of, what's going on. And I think we can all agree when everybody was working remotely, there was no collaboration. Even with my team, we'd seen one team in our office would sit on a Teams call all day together to try to mimic being in the office together. And whether they were just working on their own stuff or not, they literally sat like this all day. And I thought that was a little bizarre, right? But it worked out for them, where for me, right, I was finding I was going a day or two without talking to a certain team member. Totally unacceptable. And so, our team was the first one back in. The second they said we can come to the office, but we got to be spaced out. I basically moved our entire team to a portion of the office where nobody else was coming in anytime soon, and kind of claimed it as our own, because I knew how important it was to have that collaboration.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So, well, Dan, we greatly appreciate your time. Again, it's been awesome kind of talking to you a little bit about your market and your experiences within the office space. Typically near the end of the podcast, we have a few questions we ask pertaining to things that are not necessarily directly related to commercial real estate. And the primary question we have that we like to ask people is, Jeff and I and the people who listen to the podcast are all voracious readers. We love to learn about different facets of a variety of different topics. And the question we would like to ask is, what is the most impactful book that you've ever read? And it doesn't necessarily have to be commercial real estate related. It can be anything in particular that really just kind of move the needle for you in your life.
So I'm a book listener, not a book reader.
Yeah, I'm same here. I'm the same way, man.
If I read, I'm reading the same page 4 times over. My brain can't get out of its own way. Big one for me that I finished about a year ago is Tool of Titans, right? With Tim Ferriss has been a good one. And I just listened to Green Lights with McConaughey, which I thought was fantastic, right? Cool approach to life. Very similar, right? I'm a pretty laid back dude. So kind of just hearing his perspective on life and green lights and yellow lights, and also him creating yellow lights on purpose, creating some hardships on purpose, right? Because life shouldn't be too good all the time, which I agree with, right? You can't appreciate the good if you don't have the bad. So just off the top of my head, those 2 recently for sure is what I'm going to go with. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to second the Green Lights book by Matthew McConaughey. He's had an interesting life, man. It's always interesting.
I think you got to listen to the audio version because he narrates it and it's fantastic, right? So
absolutely great share.
I have to listen to it then. That's for sure. I just want to say, Dan, we really appreciate you coming on. And our one request that we ask every person, the guests that come on, is what are you willing to contribute to our CRE treasure chest, which is a repository of things. Could be a PDF or a little short video, or can be a case study. So our big ask is, what are you willing to contribute?
Yeah, so Raphael, we'll shoot over. We have a tenant relocation checklist, right? And it's pretty in depth, but something just to keep you on task of things you wouldn't think about when having to move your office space, right? Most folks have never had to move an office space, and typically it's the office manager that gets stuck with the task and is going to forget to order new business cards, right? Or forget to book the furniture company that day. And there's so many things to think about. It's very overwhelming. So we'll get that over for everyone to be able to utilize.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that. I know that our listeners are definitely going to find value in that. So we appreciate it.
Definitely. No, and checklists. I'm big into checklists in my life. I mean, it makes a huge difference in your ability to perform a task uniformly every single time. So I know there's a lot of people going to gain value from it. So, well, Dan, again, like I said, we greatly appreciate it. If people want to get in contact with you, whether they're looking for office space in the Vegas market, or, they have any questions pertaining to things we discussed today in today's podcast, how would you like them to reach out to you?
I'd say easiest is probably LinkedIn, right? And then just mention the podcast, Dan Palmeri, right? Easiest way to find me. Twitter, I'm on there, but I'm not actively paying attention to it. And then Instagram is really more personal stuff. So if you like see me do stupid stuff on Instagram, then have at it. But yeah, just Dan Palmeri. It took me years to get the other Dan Palmeri off the first page of Google, who is a male figure skater. So mission accomplished.
Nice. Were you ever confused? Did people ever confuse you and just kind of out of the blue say, "Oh, I didn't know you figure skated"?
I'm a pretty big dude, so I think just off first glance, they kind of figured out that was not me.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, what we'll go ahead and do is we'll include your social links in the show notes. So if you guys listen to this in a podcast format, it's going to be in the description. If you guys are watching this on YouTube as well, it will be in the description as well. So again, Dan, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for your time. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. It's made a huge difference in our download numbers. We've seen a significant uptick as a result. So we would greatly appreciate if you could do that. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can hear this message. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.